Good morning. Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I'm Pastor Joe Fox, Silver Backdrop. I'm going to continue the theme on living rural. I got two comments that I've read this morning so far, and I just figured I'd jump right into it. And the one was from someone, maybe they're new. They don't understand me. They haven't watched enough videos. But they kind of tried to take me to task. And they said, Pastor Joe, you're looking at things in a very binary way. Either or. And I think the way they phrased it was, you say people can either live in the city or suburban or rural. Giving people two stark choices. That's actually three, but I'll grant you that because I do kind of lump city and suburban together when I talk about it, which maybe we'll address that. What about, this person said, what about living rural? Well, okay, that's my second choice, living rural. You're about to add a caveat onto that, but it's still rural, so it's still binary. What about living rural where you're only an hour and a half away from symphonies and good restaurants, fine dining, and dum-dum-dum? Do you, boo? I never said how far to live away from stuff. I just said live rural. I can get to fine dining in probably an hour and a half. I could get to a symphony in an hour and a half if I wanted to. And I think y'all would agree I'm pretty rural, right? There's all kinds of gradations, people. It's like whenever I make a list, the 5 things you need to survive Teowaki, I'll get 100 comments listing the 6th thing. Right? As if I didn't know that I could have a bigger list. Oh, Lord. Look, you need to be away from the built-up areas where there's lots of people. That doesn't mean you necessarily have to live a lifestyle like Sister Kate and I. Most people who live in the rural areas don't live like Sister Kate and I. Most of the people within 10 miles of here, 20 miles of here, don't live like we live. Most. Some do. I know some of them. Some of them are Shofarians. I tell aspiring Shofarians, and I guess I need to tell y'all, I don't recommend you go from city suburban to off-grid lifestyle, off-grid homesteading lifestyle. I don't recommend you do that. That's a really hard way to go. It really is. If money is tight, I suggest you buy a place with a beat-up house or trailer on it and at least use that as your base camp while you're building the rest of the stuff. Having electricity to run your saw and having hot water to take a hot shower at the end of a day when you're first starting out, building your homestead, carving it from the wilderness, those are nice things, right? And I don't begrudge that to anybody. It's funny, I think people in city suburban lifestyle, and I used to be one of them, they don't really understand what rural is. And again, it goes back to they only know what the movies show. In the movies, I've met movie producers. I've had them in my living room in a rural area, and you could tell they were freaked out. I mean, I've told this story before, but one of the dudes had eye makeup on, and he wasn't gay. He was just from LA. That's what they do there, I guess. Wow. And so you only see what the movies show. I remember the first time I lived in a relatively rural area, that we moved to it. I called my mother, who was living in Florida, and I said, Mom, I'm in my new house. And she said, oh, Joey, that's nice. I said, I'm looking out my living room window, and guess what I'm looking at? She said, what? I said, cows. She said, what? I said, I'm looking at probably 20 cows. And because I called them cows then, I didn't know it was cattle, head of cattle. And she said, "Oh my God, where do you live?" I lived like maybe a mile outside of city limits, in that house. But we were on like 2.5 acres, and yeah, my neighbors across the street had cattle, and I was looking right at them out my living room window, and I thought it was really weird. It may surprise you, it does surprise people to know that people in the rural areas have jobs for which they are paid money, a paycheck. Oh yeah, they have bank accounts and cars. They drive new cars, some of them. People are like, you should be near a hospital. You're pretty much near a hospital a lot of places you go in this country, even if you're rural. So, it's not, you can live in the wilderness. I'm sure there's places north of Talkeetna or whatever it's called in Alaska that are pretty wildernessy, right? But when I say rural, I'm just talking about getting away from population density. Around here, and I mean this region, this area, the average house there are some houses on 5 acres, but the average house is probably sitting on 50 to 100 plus acres. And yet, so that's a lot of land for most of y'all, right? 50 to 100 plus acres. And that's what these houses are sitting on. And yet, many of them are off of paved roads. They're mostly regular houses, brick, wood. They have big screen TVs. They have computer access. A lot of them have fiber optic that they're bringing into the area. Many of them drive new little cars, and they go about their life much like you do, except they live in a rural area. And that's a huge difference. And that's what I'm talking about. Get on some land where you can be a little bit freer, raise chickens, raise chooks, have a goat in the backyard if you want, have a horse if you want, whatever. Grow some orchard and berry bushes and catch water off your roof, and nobody cares if you build a shed in your backyard. You don't need permission. You don't need permission to build a house in your backyard. Not where I live. But get away from the population density where there's just people on people on people, because that's what the problem's going to be. How rural you go, once you get rural, how you live, that's totally up to you. Somebody said, Frederick, and I agreed with him, if you're north of 50, think hard about making the jump into pure homestead living. I know people who have. I was about 50 when Sister Kate and I started. A very robust 50, I must say. But I told her when they moved the chicken houses in and we were contemplating selling this place, I said, hey, if we sell it, we're going to sell it high. If they want to buy it, they're going to pay it. Because the chicken people were buying lots of land in the area. And so I came up with a price for this place. And I said, we're going to sell it high because I don't really have it in me to do this again, meaning start from, trees and rocks and build. We're going to have to buy something a little bit more turnkey. And I recommend that, get a place with hot water and electricity and at a minimum and start from there. But then, to the extent you can, get that place ready to be off-grid. And I think I talked about that in a recent video. Have the ability so that when the power goes out, it doesn't inconvenience you overly much. It's harder to do psychologically because there's 1,000 things to do. The fence has to be fixed. The barn door's coming off the one hinge. The chickens are getting out of that one corner. My gutter's starting to fall off the back side of the house. And I also am thinking about doing solar and sticking in a rain catchment. Where's the priority, right? Now, when you're living in a tent, the priority is to get a shelter and get some kind of electricity going, right? And so it's different. But it is easier. And I recommend to people that if you can, money's an issue, right? And how much money you have determines how you can go. But it's possible to buy land with a really dilapidated, beat up house on it for not much more than just the price of the land. And but that house is very usable in the interim while you build your real house. But starting when you're north of 50, I like the way that was phrased. Yeah, just get a place already. Buy a regular place. And then here's another option. There's cities and suburbs. And when I say, again, I do paint with a broad brush, but I admit it. When I say cities and suburbs, I'm thinking of things like Chicago and then the mass suburbs all around it. I'm thinking of Washington, D.C., and the megalopolis that stretches out from that, all the way up to New York almost and down to South Carolina almost, down the 95 corridor. All of that. That's what I'm talking about. Hey, a way to go is to move to a little town. Mel Tappan was big on that. Mel Tappan was like, move to a small town because a small town has things like dentists and barbers and, blah, blah, grocery store and, blah, 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 blah. Bob Spears, who I know, if he's still alive. It's not like we hang out and chat. But he knows me, I know him. We've chatted a lot. He wrote a bunch of books on preparedness and survivalism. And he said get a house right outside of town, which is exactly what he did, like on the outskirts of town. That's another video for another time. I think you should be a little bit further out than that, than the outskirts. If you have the ability to take care of yourself, secure yourself, you're not worried about people overly much. But if you are getting close to the edge of town where there's police, that might be a good idea. But it still beats the heck out of being in the built-up areas. And so do the best you can do with what you got, where you're going, right? And you can put the own little caveats and gradations, I think I spelled that word wrong, in there wherever you want. I mean, it's a big wide world. You could live in out of a backpack in northern Alaska, the interior of Canada, or you could live in what's a little town? What was the name of that town I said I was going to be the mayor of? A little town, an unincorporated town that used to be a town and no longer is, out past the freeway kind of thing. Whatever. The more rural you can get, the better off you'll be when the world goes to chaos. And if you still want to cling to the shiny baubles because that's what makes your old lady happy, she likes to get dressed up in her gowns and finery and go to the symphony. Well, then go on with your bad self. You don't need my permission. I still don't appreciate it. Meaning, I have no desire to go to the symphony. None. I've been to symphonies. In black tie. Don't care. But if that floats your boat, then do it. You don't need my permission, people. And so, you do you. I'm just telling you, based on my experience, what I believe and what I know, being able to get out away from the masses of people, being able to produce your own food, being around people who are more self-reliant minded, that don't look to them to solve every problem we have. They solve it themselves, or they get together with their neighbors and they fix it. Those kind of people are going to be a lot better people to be around when everything goes pop and falls apart. So, hey, y'all think about it. And this was my second take. I think I told you. They have jobs out here, right? For which people are paid. And I did tell you that there are people who live in regular houses, with all the modern mod cons in their house. You can do that and still be rural. High Prairie Acres was rural. It's very rural. I had everything there. Everything that the average person would want, and more. So, get yourself some land, get on some land, get whatever kind of house you want to get, this land can be as close to what you deem important or not. I think this person also took me to task. You said, come out of her, my people, so that you don't partake of her sins and receive of her plagues. Well, people in rural Texas got the COVID. Remember how I said scripture, there's like the big picture that still applies, but then there's the deeper meanings, Yeah, those plagues are coming. Oh yeah, they are. And one can be living extremely rural. We're talking deep now, deeper. You could be living very rural and still not have come out of her, my person. Therefore, you will still receive of her plagues. Ooh, let that one stir around a little bit. Oh yeah. It's like I said in the last video, I guess we're going to wrap this one up. It all comes down to heart and mindset. That's what it comes down to. You could live in a tent and still be very worldly. Changing your attitude on that is going to go a long way to making you do better also when this stuff starts fracturing all around. So, hey, in the end, guys, you do you. You do what you want. It's cool. Whatever you want to do is fine. I can only recommend the things that I have done that I think are good ideas. Somebody asked me the other day, are you going to talk about living in South Dakota? No. Why would I? I've visited it a couple times. I worked there a couple times, but it's not like I ever lived there. I know nothing about that. And somebody else said something about, medical insurance. Why don't you talk about medical insurance living in the country and what people, I know you get military medical insurance, but could you talk about the other ones? How could I talk about the other ones? I don't know about it. And unlike some people, I don't make stuff up. I'm only going to tell you what I know. So, I got my left and right limits, and I use my insurance. You either have it or you don't. If you have it, you love it. And if you don't even know about it really. It's not important. It's very important, but it doesn't matter to you. So, no, I try not to talk about things I don't know about. Okay, I'm getting overwhelmed on comments, which is good. Comment amongst yourselves. I don't promise I'm going to read them all. Please do not put links in the comment section. Don't do that. And if you want to talk to me, don't send me a message. Send me an email, vikingservices@hotmail.com. Put your Viking level first thing in the subject line, and I may get to it. Right now, I've got a whole bunch of crews that I either owe an initial or a follow-up email to, and it's, here, let me share you some of my rural pain. I have electricity of a sorts. It works better when it's sunny. Today's cloudy, and it's going to be cloudy tomorrow. And so I got to kind of watch my electricity usage a little bit. But for me to answer serious emails that require thought and more words than just with my thumbs, I've got to fire up my laptop. I don't keep my laptop plugged in and ready to go. It's put away. It's a very small house. So I clear space. I put my laptop on. I plug it in. I fire it up. It's an old laptop. It takes forever to fire up. And then I slave it to my phone to Wi-Fi. And then I open up my email and I start going through the emails and I find the old ones and I start typing. While I'm doing that, I'm not doing anything else on the homestead. Like, I got half of the pickup truck of mulch unloaded yesterday because I also unloaded boards for another Shofarian, helped them unload these big boards. Got boards for myself. I'm going to put shelves up right here. My Pioneer Princess made stove. There's a lever on it, a slidey thing, and when you pull it this way, the fire and the smoke goes right up the chimney, and so it's very good draft. But when you want the oven to work, you slide it this way, and it diverts all the heat and the smoke around the oven and out. Well, it quit working. When you pushed it all the way in to heat the oven, smoke started coming out of every orifice of that thing. I found out I had to disassemble a little bit. It was all clogged up with creosote that we're not quite sure how it got there. I think it came out of the pipe when I cleaned it, and it just a little bit, I don't know. Anyway, we've addressed it. Pipe's clean. It's cleaned out. It's working like a champ as I speak right here. But I did that, and that was a big dirty job. And it says we're going to run out of battery. So, good time to stop. Anyway, I appreciate y'all. Hey, I do paint with a broad brush. There's always enough room to drive a pickup truck or a semi between things. All right, I'll see you out there.